Very little, if any, attention today is given to one of the most magnificent and perhaps also heroic historical editions ever made. I'm talking about the edition Carl Czerny made for Johann Sebastian Bach's Keyboard Works. Over 800 pages of printed music, carefully provided with detailed fingerings, dynamic and other expressive markings, and on top of that, for every single piece and movement, Czerny provided his fellow musicians with tempo markings. Now, today we almost totally ignore such scores for probably the main reason that these kind of annotated, or in other words, personalized editions of 18th century music are out of fashion. And although Czerny's contemporaries, including genius players and composers like Chopin, considered this edition as an unquestionable authority, copying the performance indications meticulously into the scores of their students, our focus is different. He seems to start from the idea of the pianoforte player and moreover certainly in the fugues from an absolute legato approach. We know that this approach does not work really well on the instruments Bach knew, as for instance the clavichord or the harpsichord. And although nobody less than Johannes Brahms later in the 19th century praised those fingerings, they seem to fall outside the window of interest of our time. The tempi Czerny gave for the Bach keyboard works seem to be even more questionable. Even though Czerny claims in the preface of the Well-Tempered Keyboard that the tempi are based upon the character of the pieces and, important, on how he recalls Beethoven playing Bach's music, they are described today as totally outside any practical context. See for instance Dr. Martin Noorduyn's 2013 article titled Czerny's Impossible Metronome Marks, and I quote, Czerny's editions of Johann Sebastian Bach's works for keyboard were the most complete and important at the time of publication. They were claimed to be at least partly based on Beethoven's playing, but the editor's opinions also had a lot of influence in the editing process. End of quote. Noorduyn continues by saying that these speeds are no exception in Czerny's works. I quote, Czerny's metronome marks for both his own works and for Bach's have been criticized in modern times for being almost impossible to play due to their high speed, an instance of which can be seen in example 1. While bar 24 with the demi-semiquavers in the right hand at a speed of 552 notes per minute seems to be realistically performable, the next bar is much less so. During the first 3 beats of bar 25, the demi-semiquaver sextuplets are supposed to be played at the speed of 828 notes per minute. During the last beat, with 10 notes in the right hand for every quaver in the left hand, the speed increases to an improbably fast 1318 notes per minute. End of quote. Noorduyn then states that these extreme and, in his words, improbably fast tempi, and I quote, do not exclusively occur in the purely didactical works. Figure 1 illustrates the tempo that Czerny recommends for the first of J.S.Bach's Kleine Präludien. Even though the tempo suggestion for this prelude seems to fall within the realm of physically possible tempos for well-trained virtuosos, for almost every other pianist, simultaneous close adherence to the articulation and the metronome mark would be very challenging. This would explain why of all the recordings surveyed for this article, the fastest performance is still significantly below Czerny's speed. For young students for whom the editor claims that Bach's Kleine Präludien were intended, the suggested speed would be even more problematic. End of quote. That fastest recording is mentioned in the footnote number 8 of the article. Of all the recordings surveyed for this paper, Glenn Gould's comes closest to Czerny's speed at about 100 crotchets per minute. The term closest kind of misleadingly suggests it comes close, but that's far from the truth. Gould's 100 falls 25% short compared to Czerny's 132. That problematic situation repeats itself for many pieces, as for instance the famous C major Invention. As we can see, Czerny gives quarter 138 as a tempo, which also in this case is completely outside any performance tradition of the last century. Here is an overview of 11 recordings, both on piano and harpsichord, starting with the slowest and ending with the fastest. Stunningly, none of these 11 samples are even within a 15% margin of Czerny's tempo. Worse even, 9 out of 11 recordings are at least 40% below Czerny's 138. But even Valentina Lisitsa, certainly a well-trained virtuoso in Northern's understanding, is way below the 138 Czerny gave for this piece. I'm not claiming that players of the caliber listed here could not play or could not have played this invention faster if they wanted to, though one would want to acknowledge the fact that adding 20% on top of Lisitsa's 112 is something that would be rather demanding. In any case, the sample we've taken here is large enough to demonstrate that there is no desire to do so. It would also conflict very much with what Czerny writes in the preface to this volume. Northern already mentioned it in his article, and I quote: La disposition de ces compositions indique assez que l'intention a été de réunir en un seul volume les œuvres faciles de Jean-Sébastien Bach. Or in English, the collection of these compositions indicate clearly the intention of bringing together in one part the easy works by Johann Sebastian Bach. One can argue till end of times what is easy and what not. If some would claim the 112 of Lisitsa still falls within the range of an easy piece, that for sure will not apply anymore if we adjust the speed to Czerny's 138. I guess by now you all are waiting what would happen if we applied the whole beat or double beat metronome practice to Czerny's tempo. In case you're new to this, in the whole beat metronome practice, what in my opinion is the historic use of the metronome, the ticks do not indicate the duration of the complete note value of the metronome mark, but they indicate the subdivision of it. I link an introduction video in the info card over here. So if we apply the whole beat practice to Czerny's quarter note 138, the percentage of deviation of our 11 samples change drastically. If we now take a 15% margin, we see that 8 out of 11 samples fall perfectly in range with Czerny's 138. If we even would go one step further and calculate an average tempo out of these 11 tempi, even with the fast tempo of Lisica included, the result is quarter note 74, which is only about 6% faster than Czerny's quarter note 138 read in whole beat. That 138, by the way, is very close to a very famous metronome mark we discussed quite intensely over the last weeks. Beethoven's quarter note 144 he gave for the fugue of his Hammerklavier sonata. And now we have created this nice dilemma. Either the 144 of Beethoven's fugue is giving the quarter note, resulting in this, or the 144 indicates the 8th note, the subdivision of the quarter note, resulting in this. But if one would stick to the belief that the 144 in Beethoven's fugue gives the quarter note and nothing but the quarter note, then Czerny's easy Bach invention is meant to be played like this. Or if that's beyond ridiculous for your taste and the Leonard version is what makes sense to you, then the Hammerklavier fugue should also be read in whole beat, as all other metronome marks of that period. It's impossible to make 2 out of 1. Page through this Czerny Bach edition, I'd say. Make sure you have the right edition, not later ones who oftentimes have changed this metronome mark, certainly for the inventions, and make up your mind. On a more detailed level, but that's for future videos, you will discover the correlation between the Czerny tempo for certain dance movements in the partitas and suites to be very close to Quant's tempi as well, as you will find later editions, as that of Louis Köhler, to have very similar tempi as the most illustrious student of Beethoven gave for Bach. In short, to me, the Czerny Bach edition, and certainly the edition he made for the Inventions, Sinfonias and the 6 small preludes who precede the Invention in this bundle, are an extremely strong case for proving the whole beat metronome practice historically correct. Combine that on top with the fingering provided by Czerny, and there simply is no other explanation than this. It is also, in a way, the choice between Czerny as a complete ignorant, idiot almost for Bach's music, or an amazing musician with an experienced taste and feel for it. For me, that choice is rather obvious. Let me know in the comments below what your choice is. So that was it for now. Hope this was helpful, and if it was, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, don't forget to hit the bell as well, and help us continue making these videos for you by becoming a member of our community at patreon.com. Link below and in the description box. Thanks for watching and see you soon again.